As we've defined, there are different elements to charisma: confidence, empathy, social skills, positive self attitude.
Which brings us back to the beginning: repetition. The more you repeat, the
Ramps, why do you think some people make themselves invisible in social or professional situations?
the first thing that comes to mind is confidence, right? An episode or two ago, we spoke about imposter syndrome, linked very much to confidence. Confidence in relation to language, right? They don't feel as though they are able to express themselves well enough.
I think this often goes back to the kind of experience that you have when you learn a language at school. As a teenager, especially, if you are learning a language in a classroom and you try to say something in front of a big group of people, of your peers, and you make a mistake and everyone laughs at you, for example, that can have quite a long-term traumatic effect. Say your teacher tells you off for making a mistake, that will have a long-term traumatic effect. And so I think the reason why people try to make themselves invisible is because they're trying to avoid danger, essentially. And that danger comes in the form of ridicule or the idea of making mistakes or judgment, especially. And so you can see the most charismatic people in their native language when it comes to speaking another language just completely retract within themselves and get stuck in the frozen zone and not being able to communicate at all. You know, exactly.
The frozen zone.
The frozen zone, right? Yeah. I've coined a new term, the frozen zone.
Yeah, I like it.
Where the brain slows down, you can't find the words, you don't know what to say, and next thing you know, things are moved on anyway, and you just feel shame and embarrassment and like you don't want to be there anymore.
I think it's also with what you said there about people being invisible. Sometimes it's companies as well not really giving their staff enough time to adjust to their language changes. You know, they go from using one language, which was the primary language for communication throughout the whole company for as long as the company's been alive, 10, 15, 20 years. And then all of a sudden, merger and acquisition happens and people have 3 months to now communicate and do everything in English.
The thing is, as well, is that there's this fear of leaving a bad impression with someone. I speak with a lot of lawyers, for example, and they are intelligent, good communicators, good negotiators in their own language. But then they have this, what does someone else think of me? This fear of judgment and of leaving a bad impression is so strong that the nervous system becomes overwhelmed with the idea of judgment.
It's what takes them away from presence.
Right. Exactly. What do you do in those moments?
There are a few things you can do. Thing that you want to do is to prepare. Have conversations with an AI of your choice. That's what I've been telling my clients to do. So preparation helps with these situations. Like the more work you've put in to your communication skills, the less time you'll probably spend in free state when those moments come.
The frozen zone.
So the frozen, sorry, I misquoted you. The frozen zone. So the preparation is prevention for those moments.
Right.
But if you're not prepared, take a deep breath, breathe.
Yeah. Box breathing.
I mean, if it's you know this better than I do. It's a physiological response before it's anything else. So the language is just a symptom, right? Not being able to find your words, and oh my God, that's just the symptoms of what's going on inside. So first treat the physiological part of it by breathing. And once you've calmed down, you can then, my oldest trick, ask questions, or the mirror technique. To whatever point you remember, that refreshes the conversation to back in case you got lost in your box breathing.
Right.
You
Yeah.
just
Mirror
recap what you
technique, the
remember.
question.
Mirror technique, the question back.
I think that's
I'm calm now.
that's a fantastic suggestion, because just by repeating back the question to them, getting them to nod, that gives you A, it gives you a moment to consider what you're going to say. B, it confirms that you've heard correctly what the other person has said, which is good for them and it's good for you. That will create so the good neurochemicals in your brain of connection with the other person. And C, you could do it using the breath. So the question you've just asked me is that right? That's giving you a good 10 to 20 seconds for your brain to go, I've got the right question, I've got the right question, I've got the right question. Here's the answer. For most people, B2 plus, you have all the language you need to express yourself in most situations, whether that be in business or social life. The bit that everyone struggles with is I need to know everything. You don't need to know everything. You just need to be present enough to understand what you can and then use the language that you have to answer. It doesn't have to be as complicated as it is in your mother tongue. You don't have to express and impress and use long, complicated forms and sentences and a word that is only used once a year in your normal life, right? It doesn't need to be like that. You need to connect with the other person. Connection, often in English, is best through simplicity. The simplest way to explain something is the best way most of the time in English. If we look at the example of Michelle Obama, would you describe her as confident or charismatic? And what's the difference? Right?
Confident is the belief in yourself. That's confidence. Charisma is the ability to attract people because of your personality, or the way you carry yourself. Charisma is the result of confidence. I think that's the difference between the two. I don't think you can be charismatic without being confident first, but you can certainly be confident and not be charismatic. So
Right.
I see there's a link between the two.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I think confidence is part of charisma. It's internal versus external, isn't it?
Confidence is the foundation of charisma.
Confidence
it's step one.
It's the internal part. It's the self-belief.
It's the foundation, brother. It is not possible to be charismatic without being confident.
Right.
It's the foundation of it. And so Michelle Obama is both.
Right. Confident and charismatic, yeah.
Yeah. The first person that comes to mind when I think charismatic, and I think characters in films, is obviously James Bond, right? He just oozes charisma. There's no way in any film that he walks into the room and he doesn't own it.
Right.
Without even saying a word, right? Can you think of any other cinema characters that you would say are quite charismatic?
Okay, a borderline one, because it's borderline narcissistic, is the way Robert Downey Jr. portrays Tony Stark in the Marvel movies, right? It's charisma, but it's pretty close to narcissism at the same time.
He flirts with the line between charisma and, as you said, borderline narcissism, right? I think what makes him charismatic is that he's aware of how he comes across, and in his own way makes fun of himself as well from time to time.
Right.
And I think that's where the charisma comes from. The character of Tony Stark loves to show off how intelligent he is. It's not about his money. It's not about the fact he's Iron Man. It's sort of like, oh, I've got a mega brain,
Yeah.
And so he's still quite a bit nerdy. And I think that's what maybe makes him, again, a bit of the charisma is that there is a bit of flaws in his personality, and he plays to his flaws. Where
he is a flawed man. I think that's the attraction of James Bond, is he is inherently flawed.
Yeah.
But he accepts that. as this is who I am. With anyone who has charisma, confidence, yes, but that confidence is about understanding what your self-image is. You know,
Yeah.
having particularly good social skills is another element to being charismatic. For me, someone that is charismatic is someone who is able to, like we say, attract attention and interest from people. I don't think you have to be extroverted to be able to do that. There is a quiet sense of someone being in the room, as well as a hello, I'm here kind of extroverted charisma. When someone's leaving an impression on you, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big impression. It can be something less, I don't know,
Less wow, for lack of a better word.
less
In terms of
powerful.
how impactful.
Yeah, what do you think? Do you think charisma is only focused on those extroverted people, or can
No,
it go
not at
both
all.
ways?
No, not at all. It can go both ways. I think the two film examples we use, film characters, they're quite opposite of the spectrum. Tony Stark is to some degree loud, really takes over the room wherever he goes, mostly through what he says and maybe even his entrances and so on. Whereas James Bond isn't. If anything, he tries not to attract attention to himself when he's entering a new space. He's not necessarily going to be the loudest guy in the room as well.
But always switched on, always aware of what's going on.
Exactly.
This is the social skills aspect. Is I don't have to insert myself into the conversation, but when I'm called upon, I'm going to say exactly the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, yes. I mean,
Because
I
it's about
suppose.
reading the room, isn't it? Owning the room and reading the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are skills which are very highly evolved in people who have a lot of charisma.
Just for clarity, by read the room, what do you mean by that?
Someone who is able to understand the social dynamic of the audience that they have in front of them. For example, if the room is low energy, they match the energy. If the room is high energy, they match the energy. They are very socially aware and are able to move through different groups with empathy and awareness.
Nice. Nice. And both characters do. I mean, Tony Stark knows how to read the room. He uses that room he's reading to then shock the room. Whereas James Bond, as you pointed out, reads the room in order to try to understand who to be more aware of.
I think as well, if you look at the two characters, the difference, both are good at reading a room, but the Tony Stark character wants to own the room. He wants to be the center of attention. He wants to be the guy, right? Hey, everyone look at me. I'm the smart guy. I'm the billionaire. I'm the one that's in charge here. Whereas James Bond is he's not trying to dominate in the same way. He's trying to achieve something. If he has to dominate, he dominates, but that's not his first instinct. The first instinct is to gather information, is to see what's happening, to understand and be aware of who's there, what's going on, right?
Yeah. Are charismatic people always likable?
Oh, that's a good question. I I don't know. I don't think so. In fact, I'm going to say no. They're not always likable because we've used the example of Tony Stark, but I can think of another example of someone who incredibly charismatic but very divisive, and has recently been in the news because he was assassinated.
Oh yeah,
Charlie Kirk,
Charlie Kirk.
right? There is no doubt that the man had charisma because he was able to attract a huge following of people. What he was talking about is hate speech and really disgusting rhetoric, but he was able to draw a crowd for the right and wrong reasons. And he was able to maintain people's focus and attention. Even if they didn't like him, they would still watch him. And so for me, yes, I think it is possible to be a an unlikable person but still be charismatic.
Now, bringing it back to language, right? Is charisma important in language learning?
In language learning, no. In language delivery, yes.
Do explain, my good man.
Well,
Do explain.
well, the learning aspect is
Well, that's
is a
I mean,
is a personal
that's clear.
thing. It's usually individual, right? You don't necessarily have to learn a language with other people, but speaking, delivering information, presenting, any of these public facing kind of roles, having charisma helps you connect with other people. And really, in communication and language skills, what you're trying to do is connect with people. That, for me, is the most important part of speaking another language, is trying to engage who you're talking to. It's more important than getting everything right. Having perfect language, but not being able to connect with the people you're speaking to is like having a Ferrari, but only driving in first gear.
Is it possible for language learners to develop charisma in the language they
Absolutely.
speak? And how? What are some tips and tricks that you can share with our audience?
My first instinct is to say, yes, charisma can be developed. I think it's just a matter of understanding yourself. Who are you? What are your values? How do you express yourself in a way that is true to who you are in your native language? Like we were saying earlier, having charisma isn't about being extroverted or introverted. It's about being attractive in a lot of ways. If the interactive, communicative part is something that you find difficult, start with social awareness. Start with paying attention to what is going on around you.
That can also be part of the problem, don't you think? Because when people are paying attention on what is happening around them, and we know this very well, sometimes conversations are happening around them,
Right.
and then they go from complete relaxation to panic. What
Right.
does that word mean? I need to know that word. So I
But you
guess what I'm
don't.
trying to
You don't
say
need to know that
is
word. That's the thing. You don't need to know every single word that someone is saying to understand what they're trying to tell you. This is one of the most repeated tips that we give on the show is you need to understand 70 to 80% of what someone has said to understand the majority of the context. You don't need to know every single word. If you are focusing on trying to understand every single word, you're wasting energy. Energy that you could put into making connection with the people that you're talking to. It's not about perfection.
it's about progress.
Yeah.
Having said that, are there things that people can do that would help them to feel more confident and eventually communicate in a way that is charismatic?
Repetition. Put yourself in the position of connecting with people as many times as you can. Put your hand up and volunteer for presenting in English in the meeting. Go and find a group of English speakers in your local city that meet for a drink once a week. Repetition, repetition, repetition. As we mentioned earlier, confidence is a big part of charisma. So repetitively putting yourself into the position of building your confidence of speaking and understanding other English speakers is going to do a huge amount for how charismatic you are. And that will have a positive impact on your self-image, your self-talk, your confidence. It will create a positive emotional state instead of a negative one, and therefore you're less likely to freeze or to want to run away. You have to get over that initial fear of connection, of putting yourself out there and get out there. What do you think?
100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you first work on confidence and the charisma will slowly come together. Repetition, you're spot on. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Look at every single one of the skill sets work on reading, because the benefit of that is you are in complete control of how quickly to go. And it's a great way to learn new words and rehash structures that are perhaps new to you. So read and start with newspaper articles or things that you're already interested in doing. When you're reading, when you come across new words, write down that word, highlight it, finish reading the article, come back, look at the paragraphs of where the unknown words are, read around them, try to use context to figure out what it means. Once you've read it again, repeated the section that you're interested in with a new word or new phrase, write down what you think it means, having used the context, and then go look in the dictionary. See how close you are. That will build confidence, because the skill of using context to figure out new words and new expressions is something that becomes very, very useful as soon as you start having conversations with multiple people. Because in those situations, it becomes very difficult to stop Frank and say, hey, Frank, what did you mean when you said this word? Because There's also John in there. There's also Mary. There's also Roberta.
I want to be in this office. Frank, John, and Mary. Right? Get much more English than that.
And Roberta, right? And so that will definitely help build your confidence. Once you start to realize that you are getting better at this skill of figuring out new words and new expressions, the meanings of them through context, you're no longer freaking out when you're in those conversations and someone uses a word or expression you don't know. That is something I recommend even for people who don't like reading. If you don't like reading, it's fine. Read the newspaper articles. Most adults in the business world read this part of the news that you read or part of the news that you follow. Maybe you don't go into the hard politics stuff, but I find it hard to believe there's people who do not, there are adults who don't read the newspaper at all. At least people who work in the business world. You listen to the news. You knew who Charlie Kirk was. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was until I saw the news that a guy called Charlie Kirk was killed, and then I said, "Okay, who is this guy?"
I'll be honest. I get most of my information from scrolling things like TikTok.
Either way, look, the news now. There's multiple ways to read or stay informed about what's going on in the world, right?
Right.
And I think once your confidence improves, charisma generally takes care of itself. Because if you have it in your own language, you'll have it in English. It's only a matter of time. But work on your confidence, I would say.
Okay.
You've got to read the room as well, right? It's great that you're able to use these idiomatic expressions and phrasal verbs and all this colorful language, but read the room. We're talking about charisma. We were talking about wanting to attract people. As something as simple as making things overly complicated or making things unnecessarily complicated, you're chipping away at the charisma that you maybe in the beginning you may have. Read the room. You've had a conversation with a couple of people. You are aware more or less of everyone's level of English. You know that you are, varying levels. So why make it difficult for someone else in there who you know very well that perhaps is not the strongest speaker in the group? Make yourself easy to understand, because you know yourself what it's like to not understand.
But this is part of charisma, empathy.
Exactly.
Understanding your audience. Who am I speaking to? Is their English better, the same, or worse than mine? How can I communicate to everyone at the same time so that I will be understood and make connection with people? Social skill is not just about confidence. Confidence is a big part, yes, but the social skills of someone who is charismatic, the empathy that they have, keeping themselves in a positive emotional state. An example would be, instead of looking for the problems, looking for the mistakes in your language, look for solutions, look for options. Forget about your mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. We do it all the time. I guarantee that you make mistakes in your own language, in your own jobs, but you're not as hard on yourself about them. All of these aspects is charisma. It's not just one thing.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, I know you say forget about your mistakes. It's hard. It's hard to forget about your mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I know. So maybe allow us to rephrase that and say, think of the mistakes as proof that you are still improving, because that means there are still things to learn.
Everyone walks their own path. Everyone's journey takes a different amount of time. The things that you struggle with will be different to somebody else's. But that's not to say you aren't making progress. What does progress look like for you? Yeah, don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to yourself 1 year ago. Because for a lot of people, when you're learning a second language, you don't have the opportunity to live in the country of the language that you're learning. Often you're learning that language, living and working and communicating 90% of the time in your mother tongue. Okay, so don't compare your journey to someone, even if you started at the same point, but they get to live in the country, or they have a partner who speaks the target language that they're learning. Comparison is the thief of joy. If you lose the joy of what you're doing and it becomes work, you'll stop making progress.
I request a rewind of the quote that was said a few minutes ago. Thank you.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Man, I love that.
Focus on you. Focus on what you can control and how you can move forward, and compare yourself to where you were last year. That's the only real comparison you can make, is what am I doing differently? How am I better? Everyone else is running their own race.
This is an E.
That's an E, yeah.
Compelling.
Compelling.
Compelling. Compelling.
Compelling.
Compelling.
Compelling.
Is it correct?
Compelling.
Compelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the emphasis is in the middle. Compelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Charismatic. Charismatic.
Charismatic. Charismatic.
Charismatic. I don't know.
No. Charismatic.
Charismatic.
Very good.
Can charisma be learned, or people just born with? And does charisma transcend cultural and language sort of barriers?
Yes.
Okay, please do explain, sir. I mean, I would not ask a yes/no question.
Ask me an open-ended question, and I'll give you more information.
Yeah, well, how?
Right. All right. Okay, so yes, charisma can be learned. Yes, some people are just born with it. And yes, I think it can transcend language learning and other things.
Cultural and language barriers.
Absolutely. As we've defined, there are different elements to charisma: confidence, empathy, social skills, positive self-attitude. These are all things that you can work on. So the first thing to do is to decide, okay, which of these areas is my weakest, and focus on that.
Okay. So how can it then transcend cultural and language barriers? So someone can be an A2 in terms of spoken language, but still be charismatic.
I think people who are charismatic, it doesn't matter what language level they are, they're able to connect and communicate with people. That's the ultimate goal.
So if you're like an A2...
Yeah, change your perception of what the goal is. The goal is not to understand everything. I think I may have mentioned that. But the goal is to connect and communicate. If that means that you have to draw pictures to be able to do it because you're a low level, draw pictures. If that means that you develop self-deprecating humor and say, I know I make a lot of mistakes, I don't really care. Then develop self-deprecating humor. If that means that, okay, no, I'm going to focus on my listening skills and my empathy in order to connect with people, I'm not going to speak as much, but I'm really going to listen to what other people are saying, then do that. You are in control over how you are able to manage these situations. Each situation has a different set of challenges. How are you working on what you need to work on to improve in different situations? Get good at one. Discover, oh, hang on a minute, I'm having problems with this one as well. Get good at that. Work out what the different elements of the thing that you're struggling on are, and find a daily practice that you can implement into your language learning. If speaking in meetings is a problem, spend 5 minutes on ChatGPT before every meeting in English, speaking to ChatGPT where there is no pressure. Your brain is primed for speaking English right before you have to speak English. If your problem is listening and understanding, spend 5 minutes before an interaction listening to something in English so that your brain is prepared for listening in English.
Well said, brother. Well said.
Do you want to add anything to... I kind of went on a bit of a rant there, didn't I?
No. I think you shared very useful information in that bit.
Mhm.
You know, if I was to add anything to it, I would say confidence usually comes from proof of having done it before.
Right.
Which brings us back to the beginning, repetition.
Right.
The more you repeat, the better you get at it, the more it'll be easier to believe that you are able to do it. Confidence is the foundation from which charisma then takes place. I don't think, I truly believe that. I don't think you can be charismatic without being confident.
You can, but it's disingenuous.
You got found, then it's not charisma. Then you're faking it. You know what I mean?
It's not authentic.
Exactly. Real charisma, you've got to be confident.
Sure.
And I don't think charisma is really something you can work on per se. It's you just discover how you are charismatic. It's within you, and through these acts, you then discover what is your charisma. Because Idris Elba's charisma and Tom Hardy's charisma are two different types of charisma. Both of them are charismatic, but they had to find what it is that is charismatic about them. You know, you have your own style of communication and your own way of doing things, your own way of dressing, your own way of coming across.
Right.
So I'm not sure those are things that we can teach. I don't think I can teach somebody that. I can teach them to believe in themselves. Then they can discover what that is for them, the charisma.
Right. That was nicely put. So after a little bit of time to reflect on our conversation from the other day, Ramps, let's have a quick recap about everything that we covered on why people can feel invisible and what is charisma and how that can help you with your language learning. We talked about why people feel invisible having a lot to do with the frozen zone.
Absolutely, which brought me to coin a term inspired by the frozen zone. I've called it the black and white thinking.
Okay.
Black and white thinking, because when people are learning a language, part of the reason why they shrink is that they see it as I got it or I don't got it.
Right.
There is no gray area in between.
Right.
Now, black and white thinking upon reflection, I thought does have a space in language learning. That would be when looking at new words and new expressions and so on. That's simply black and white. It's either this or it's that. But as soon as a communication comes into play, we can no longer adopt or approach it with a black and white kind of thinking.
Right. Yeah. It's this, everything has to be done by the textbook kind of way, isn't it? I don't know. I got to use that phrase exactly. Otherwise, I'm just not going to speak. When in fact, a lot of communication happens in the middle where you're taking bits from here and bits from there and putting it all together and seeing what works.
Precisely, right? And this black and white thinking, moving away from it when communicating, would allow us to explore, experiment with the language, and more importantly, find a way to connect with people. Because one thing that we kept speaking about, particularly you, when I was watching back the video, is the connection. With the black and white thinking forces you to focus more on the actual wording, what you say, how you say it, which are all important things. But ultimately, what you want from any sort of interaction is to connect with a person, even if it's for 5 minutes.
Right. And then leading from that is the overwhelming sense of comparison, comparing where you are now with the person that you're speaking to and worrying about being judged by them because you see your language as worse than them. And so I quoted Thomas Jefferson by saying, comparison is the thief of joy. And if you're not enjoying speaking the language, it's going to be difficult for you to continue to progress with the language.
And to connect, ultimately.
And to connect, yeah. Seriously, in life, in business, it's about the connections that we make and the relationships that we build. And so if you get stuck in this black zone, it's impossible to put yourself out there and make those connections. If what you have to remember about comparison is, even if you do think, even if your language is worse than someone else's, they've been where you've been, and they're busier thinking about their own language than yours, because we are very selfish in the way that we think. We think about ourselves and how we are perceived. We're not necessarily judging or thinking about other people the majority of time.
Yeah. Which brings us to the other point we spoke quite a lot about on this episode, charisma.
Right. Yes.
Charisma.
What is charisma? And how is it different to confidence? Because there is a big difference. We spoke about confidence in our previous video, link up above, and we look at confidence as a very external type of state of being, whereas charisma is an internal state of being, which is in part due to confidence. You were very adamant about the fact that you can't be charismatic without being confident, which is completely true, but confidence is only one part of charisma. You need other things, including a strong sense of empathy, social skills, and a positive self-image that makes up the rest of the whole.
And after rewatching and listening to you speaking about the internal and external of charisma, it really struck a chord, especially all the qualities that you mentioned now. They're all things internally, right? Emotional intelligence, ability to socialize, all of those things are things that start inwardly, and the results of you'll see through communication outwardly.
Absolutely. Someone who has a lot of charisma, they have very strong emotional intelligence. They're usually good leaders as well. And which was the other thing we were talking about, which is you can have charisma without confidence, but it's inauthentic. And eventually you can see through it. It becomes transparent. So Yes, I think, and that's the important thing to remember. You don't have to start with confidence if you want to develop your charisma. You can start with one of the other qualities and focus on that. Focus on your empathy, focus on your listening skills, focus on social skills. There's a great video from Vin Jiang, who's a communication expert, which I've left in the description below, which is 5 body language tips to make you seem more charismatic. So even if you start with your body language, you can still appear to be more charismatic while you work on all of the other parts. Well, that wraps things up for today. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.